Hey everyone, welcome back. Jade is here, Jade is here. There are a lot of things to unpack. Ironically, there are actually not that many build setups for her because her kit is so bloated that most builds already allow her to do everything. The main discussion point is whether or not you use her fancy looking Exalted 4. Otherwise, most Jade builds will look quite similar. Now, I've got 3 build variants with her today, which differ more so in how she feels than how she builds, but with that out of the way, let's see how she works. How to play her, and setups for her. Disclaimer that this video showcases how she works at the time of release. I honestly expect them to tweak her down a bit because her current firepower puts even Dante pre-nerf to shame. You can acquire her blueprints from completing the Jade Shadow questline, whereas her parts are farmed from the new game mode. I'm gonna be real with you, I haven't played the new game mode and know nothing about it beyond the fact that that's how you get her parts. My thoughts on Jade? She's supposedly a support frame. Instead, she feels more like the frame that reigns on the throne over everyone else. She does not care for what enemies do, she does not care for what mission you put her in. She literally does everything. The only thing she's really missing is good survivability, of which is mainly covered by her Razor Wing-esque 4, or just putting tanking methods on her Beat Arcane's mods or helmets. But energy? Not really an issue due to spare mod slots. Damage? Honestly, way more damage than a support frame has any reason to have. Crowd control? I mean, sort of, but with the sheer damage she outputs and access the complete defense strip, she doesn't really need a strong one. I don't think Helmet adds that much to her kit, mainly either to patch survivability or just buff her damage sources further or standard grouping. Her kit is already quite bloated in functionality and doesn't really change with Helmet options. Kit time. Her passive is quite simple to understand. She gets a second aura mod slot for modding. Yes, this slot also gives its own aura capacity bonus. So she gives about plus 28 capacity on frames instead of the usual plus 14. Makes her a lot cheaper on Forma too. One of the aura slots naturally has an aura Forma polarity as well. The second effect of her passive is based off of her Judgment mark. It's literally just a marker from her 1 and her 4, but it makes anyone tagged by it receive 50% more total damage. For a spammable debuff. Cool. Her first ability is called Light's Judgment. It throws an orb at your reticle, creating a spherical zone. Anything in the zone gets tagged by the Judgment mark. This mark activates her second passive for 50% total damage, but it's also used for her fourth ability mechanics. You can throw up to 5 orbs at once anywhere on the map. On Steel Path, it basically deals 0 damage to enemies within its area. It heals teammates inside it at a percent to HP per second, scaling with strength, and stacks per zone overlapping you. Otherwise, it's a somewhat short duration zone that's mainly used to mark areas to nuke with your 4. Do note that marking enemies has line of sight and is done relative to the center point of the zone at ground level. Running gun builds will spam this ability and run neutral to negative duration. Campier builds will run positive duration for this ability. Note that this ability will not currently proc Archon Intensify at the time of posting and is probably a bug. If you want actually good survivability, but do not want to use her 4, this is the ability to Helmet over. Her 2 is Symphony of Mercy. This ability has 3 sub-functions, but only one can be active at once, unlike other Warframes. Basically, you cast this ability once, and whatever sub-ability you toggle to will be the one currently active. Most of the time, you'll be using Power of 7 for ability nuke and defense strip builds. Spirit of Resilience is only useful if you are not using your 4th ability, as its scaling is somewhat weak. Sub-ability 1, Power of 7, grants 25% strength per 100 strength you have. Second one, Deathbringer, specifically buffs weapon damage only. Note that while it buffs the shots of her 4, it does not buff the damage of her 4's AoE alt-fire detonation. Hence, using Power of 7 for good automatic defense strip is typically better than Deathbringer unless you're fighting bosses, or don't need the defense strip. Spirit of Resilience gives percent shields per second, which can be okay on higher shield builds, of which I will not be using. More importantly, it reduces the 4 seconds recharge delay of fully broken shields, but the value was too small to be valuable without spending multiple mod slots to equip both Vigilante Vigor and Fast Deflection together. The duration of this ability is extended by 2 seconds per Judgment marked enemy killed. Amount of added time does not scale by duration, whereas the initial ability length and added limit capping at 2 times the initial length is. If you want actually good survivability but want to use her 4, this is the ability to Helmet over. The third ability is Ophinimize. Imagine a big 3D cone in front of you with a small sphere around your body like Heroes Condemned. Anything within this hitbox will have their defenses, read, all shields and armor stripped permanently by a certain percentage per second, while also being increasingly slowed by a certain percent per second. It deals basically 0 damage on Steel Path even when full strip, despite it stating that it deals damage here, and it's only for vanity. The slow and defense strip applied twice per second at half the listed value, i.e. reaching 50% strip and slow per second will make it apply 25% every half second. Range does not affect the cone angle, just how far the cone reaches. The defense strip and slow have a hard line of sight check, so if you want to use this ability to defense strip, you will want quite high strength as feasible to make up for line of sight limitations. The defense strip is affected by corrosive projection, which you will see me use later. This means you'd only have to reach 82% to full strip rather than 100. Tapping while active deactivates it, while holding will recast it on fresh timers. Her fourth ability, Glory on High, is Titania on Crack using Archwing controls. Imagine you get a slightly slower Dex Pixia with a tiny AoE, but its alt-fire is Hildren's Balefire Charger massive AoE. Except you don't even have to shoot the enemy, it just instantly spawns the massive AoE on top of every marked enemy. You can shoot it like Dex Pixia if you want, which is mainly just for bossing, but for map clearing, you realistically will only be spamming her 1 plus alt-fire. The alt-fire will produce a Balefire Charger hitbox directly on top of any enemy tagged with the Judgment Mark. Marks are applied by anything within radius of her 1 or at 10% chance shot directly by your normal mode of your 4. It does not matter where they are on the map, her alt-fire detonation tracker has infinite range. You can literally kill enemies 100 meters away one room over. And here's the kicker, the blast radius of her alt-fire has 0 fall off, scales with range, and when hitting targets with alt-fire inside of her 1, the final radius gets multiplied by another 1.5 times. Yes, if you have 20 enemies together, well, 20 nukes go off, all overlapping. She also gets base 35% damage reduction when in her 4, scaling up to 50% cap at 143 strength. It costs a modest amount of energy to cast her alt-fire, which can only be done when at least one enemy is marked with Judgment. Alt-fire can only be used once per second, unaffected by fire rate, reload speed, or casting speed. The alt-fire is affected by all DPS increasing pistol mods on her Exalted Pistol Glory, except base damage and multi-shot. Her pistol cannot trigger nor benefit from Warframe pistol arcanes. Her pistol and its alt-fire AoE are both affected by secondary Outburst. It also obliterates acolytes even if no other enemies are around. If you can get a group, it will instantly one-shot them. See why I said I don't expect this to last? Enjoy! Oh, and she also has a 10% chance to tag enemies shot by her normal pistol mode with the Judgment debuff, but this is literally never used since Trash Fodder dies by spamming 1 plus alt-fire, and alt-fire does 0 damage to bosses, so you just chuck your 1 at them and then spam your normal laser shots. So what about her survivability? Yeah, she doesn't really have much, except the poor man shield gating tools from her second sub-ability, which prevents you from using her damage amp or strength amp. If you're using her 4 a lot, most of her survivability will come from flying around with a built-in 50% damage reduction combined with the Aviator's 40%. If grounded, you will probably need adaptation in armor or subsume her 4 off, otherwise her 2 off for a survivability helmet. Because her casting is clunky, I would advise 2 casting speed shards. Now I'm gonna open this by looking at her Exalted Pistol Glory first. Its main use is for her 4 and the alt-fire mechanics. Normally, it functions like a slower shooting Dex Pixia with smaller AoEs produced at the point of impact. The alt-fire instead spawns massive AoE hitboxes on top of all enemies marked by Judgment from your 1 or 4's normal shots. When building Glory, you need to decide between a full gun build, a hybrid build, or a purely ability nuke build. This is because they differ in how mods interact. The alt-fire of Glory is unaffected by reload speed, fire rate, or casting speed, as well as ignoring multi-shot and base damage. Therefore, the build looks quite different depending on use. Let's go over an ability nuke Glory first. We go all in on raw damage crits, corrosive to nuke everything. Bane does affect the alt-fire ability damage as well as double dipping on dots. The 60-60 elemental is the flex slot, as there aren't that many other mods that do anything on the alt-fire build still. For the hybrid build, we dropped the 60-60 mod in favor of multi-shot and base damage so that you can actually shoot things properly. Both Hornet Strike and Galvanized Multi-Shot are significantly stronger than a Bane for the normal fire mode. You still retain massive AoE and good damage for ability nuking since status is low and unlikely to double dip the Bane. For the gun DPS build, we dropped the Bane since we aren't using the Alt-Fire Nuke at all. The normal fire mode has pretty low base fire rate and it just doesn't really feel that good. I would rather use this slot for Lethal Torrent and get more multi-shot and fire rate. Use Arcane Velocity on Jade with this to get comfortable fire rate levels. For any variant of Jade that uses her 4, you should be using Secondary Outburst. It roughly triples the damage output of the pistols and also the Nuke Alt-Fire. This is the only pistol arcane that carries over to Exalted Pistols and grants up to plus 240% crit chance and crit damage for 30 seconds. This lines up well with Matarai and resetting other buffs, like Armor Strip. Every 30 seconds, you uncast your 4, go into Operator, double Void Sling, melee cancel out, and ADS to holster your melee. This will activate Secondary Outburst and all other relevant stuff. Now you go back into your 4 and blow stuff up for another 30 seconds. It does not matter what pistol you put Secondary Outburst on, but you should pair it with Ceramic Dagger and Karnon. Ceramic Dagger can get 166 initial combo for free without needing Rivens or Arcanes. If you're willing to, you can combine this with Melee Crescendo to get the last 54 combo needed to get it to 220 initial combo always. Basically, the Gun and Blade perk gives 1 initial combo per primary weapon kill up to 100. This was patched to only stack off primary weapons now, by the way, and you can't stack it by killing with your pistols anymore. So just bring a primary you're comfortable with, like Torrid, Tentaglaxian, Boar, and Karnon. I don't care. The Evolution 3 perk, you should pick Adept Reflexes for another 20 initial combo. We get another 46 from running Corrupt Charge and Covert Lethality. A Riven can easily give you the missing 54 combo, so you don't have to deal with Melee Crescendo, but can get pricey. Okay, let's look at her build variations. Now, there isn't that much going on, as it's mainly about how you play her. First up is an Omega range ability nuke setup with access to a 3 seconds defense strip as needed. This is the comfier non-max DPS setup, which still easily does hundreds of thousands of damage against fully armored enemies. Reminder that I'm using 2 casting speed shards. My auras of choice are Growing Power and Corrosive Projection. This is how I achieve the 3 seconds armor strip while also granting more strength to DPS. Aviator Excellence is used since it stacks with our innate 50% damage reduction on our 4 for a total of 70% damage reduction overall. This should be enough so long as you keep moving, otherwise a slower playstyle should drop Augur Reach for adaptation, and consider replacing Aviator with Cunning Drift. This build does not care about Focus School and reaches 224 strength with Mult Augmented fully stacked and Growing Power active. This makes your second ability, Power of 7, grant 56 strength to top us out at 280 overall. This makes your 3 strip 28% defense per second or 84% after 3 seconds. You only need to reach 82% because of Corrosive Projection, achieving full defense strip. 265 range grants 16 meter radius orbs from your 1, allowing you to carelessly toss them in the general direction of your enemies, and easily paint the current room with judgment marks for run and gun nuking. For campier playstyles, you can replace Fleeting Expertise with Equilibrium. Camping will center more loot drops near you, and you won't have to recast your 1 as often, both due to higher duration and camping an area your 1 already is present in. 265 range also makes your 4's Alt-Fire have base 10.6 meter radius. This is increased to 15.9 meters when enemies are tagged by your 4 while they're inside of your 1. Bigger range makes this easier to pull off. Yeah, it's really big. Molt Efficiency brings our duration back up to 114 so that your 1 lasts 11.4 seconds, and your Armor Strip Aura, if you need it, lasts 34 seconds. So how about our second build variation? This one is a lot more offensive and more suited for endurance nuking where a higher DPS is wanted while also achieving faster armor strip. Reminder that I'm using 2 casting speed shards. Now this is a 2 second armor strip build that has 1.5 times higher DPS. In other words, you're running around 410 strength. This build requires Matarai for plus 40% strength snapshotting your 3, unless you want to substitute 34% strength and Archon shards onto her. The only difference in modding is Augur Secrets instead of overextended and using a normal Intensify. We have base 209 strength increasing to 294 with Mult Augmented and Growing Power. This goes further to 334 with Matarai, which also makes your second ability, Power of 7, grant 83.5 strength. Adding this together pushes us up to 417.5 strength, making your 3 strip 42% defenses per second or 83.5% after 2 seconds. You only need to reach 82% because of Corrosive Projection, achieving full defense strip. We still have 175 range for 10.5 meter radius orbs from your 1. This causes your 4's Alt-Fire to explode at 7 meters base radius, expanding to 10.5 meters when hitting enemies with your 1. This build has roughly 1.5 times higher nuking DPS than the first setup and is best suited for endurance. Consider dropping Augur Secrets for rolling guard and adding plus 18% strength in Shards so you can still reach the 2 seconds full defense strip. Otherwise, the build is quite similar, with Molt efficiency to bring our duration back up to 114, so that your 1 lasts 11.4 seconds and your armor strip aura, if you need it, lasting 34 seconds. This is a very aggressive build for DPS and clearing quickly aimed towards long runs. For typical Steel Path play, I would honestly recommend using the first build instead. The third build variation tones down her range and efficiency due to being grounded and not as ability spammy. This is for if you don't want to play her as an ability nuke. Reminder that I'm using 2 casting speed shards. If you choose the helmet, the likely option is to get rid of her 4. However, do keep in mind it is an amazing tool for killing acolytes, even from range. If you do keep her 4 just for acolytes, I would recommend getting rid of her 1 for a proper survivability tool, since you can still tag judgment by just shooting them normally with your 4. Keeping her 2 is preferred since it sticks to you, unlike her 1, and grants you significantly higher weapon damage or much more strength. It can also give shields and reduce recharge delay, but this only matters if you're not helmeting on any survivability over her 1 or 4. Keep in mind, you can only have 1 effect of her second ability active at once. This build revolves around keeping her 3 up to full strip defenses in 3 seconds while relying on gun or melee gameplay to kill hordes of enemies. The new blast changes work extremely well with this setup since you can passively strip as you DPS and build blast stacks. Note that corrosive procs are multiplicative to your defense strip and thus will not let you full strip them any sooner, but this also means that you can now build your weapon for full blast instead of split corrosive blast, which would reduce the amount of blast procs you deal. Only corrosive projection is additive to ability defense strip to reduce ticks or strength required. Our survivability comes from vitality mixed with guardian as a fallback if our shields break, which is likely to happen since we're grounded instead of flying around in our 4. Molt Augmented combined with Growing Power brings us to 283 strength or 28.3% defense strip per second. This is 85% after 3 seconds, which is higher than the 82% required with corrosive projection. If you do not use Umbral Intensify, you will reach only 270 strength, which is short of the 273 strength benchmark and will cost you 1 strength Archon shard to fix. Prime Sure-Footed is used since this build is grounded and Jade has no innate resistances to knockdowns. Your 1 still produces 8.7 meter radius heal zones and judgment mark areas. Your 3 still defense strips up to 29 meters in front of you, and if you still need your 4, it has a usable 5.8 meter radius alt-fire, even without your 1's judgment zone. Arcane Guardian can be replaced by Fire Rate or Attack Speed Arcane if you subsume on a tanking helmet. And that's it. As I said, there's a lot going on with Jade to talk about, and a lot of tools at your disposal to use. On the other hand, because everything she does wants range and strength, and only needs moderate duration, then you don't really have that many different builds, despite playing her quite differently each time. Hopefully this build was helpful in deciding how you want to play Jade. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible. Like I've done with the Jade Shadow updates. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.